Welcome to part 2 in this series with Jack Tomasello. You mentioned designing a grape.
That was a brainchild of Dr. Larry Coy, who's a great farmer, but actually he's a medical doctor. That was his doctorate's in medicine, not viticulture, but he's a grape farmer. And he was trying to find a variety that would grow really well in New Jersey from Italy. I mean, many of us have, Italian, we're of Italian descent. So he managed, and he would be a very interesting guy for you to talk to because he's really interesting. Or Jim Carell as well from Bellevue. But they had made a trip to Italy in search of the perfect grape for New Jersey. This was something that was going to a grape breeder, I believe, and they found something that would work in our soils. And so I played with it for a couple of years just to see how it would do, and it did fairly well, and it made it through our winters, and some of the other guys did as well. And it's just something different, and that's, we're always looking for things that are different. Made beautiful wine, and it's an Italian variety that no one's ever grown before. Took a lot of time to do this because you have to get the cuttings, and they have to be quarantined for a certain amount of time, and USDA has to approve them, and then they can be transferred to a nurseryman. We have a nurseryman in Fredonia, New York, who is now grafting them and making more plants, and then we're distributing the plants, and we're trying to see what grows and how well they grow in certain farms, and different farms are different locations. So that all goes into it. Sometimes takes a decade or two to do this, but it's moving along fairly rapidly, which is good. And so we have about a half acre of this grape, and we took our cuttings this year and sent them up to that nursery in New York State, and a number of us did, and we're going to have them grafted, and so we can make more plants. But this is something that. It was Larry Coya's idea. Jim Carell had together, I think, and it's really going to be a positive thing, I think, going forward. Because this way we have something that we can say is our own. It's from New Jersey. It's from Italy, but it's first grown in the Garden State. So, and maybe it'll spread to other states. Who knows? That's how these things happen. I don't think people are quite aware of what extremes we go to raise grapes. We have drip irrigation, what we call trickle irrigation or drip irrigation on all of our farms, for the simple fact that if we need the water, it's there. We have nets we apply to our trellis system to cover the plants up to keep the birds out of the vineyard. We're dealing with something now that is in its second year for us here in New Jersey, third year in Pennsylvania, an insect called the spotted lanternfly, which people are very, very well aware of now because it's such a pest in the fall of the year. And that's a very serious problem we're dealing with because they do affect, they will kill a grapevine if you get a number of them on there. I think there's 25 to 30 per plant can kill a vine dead. And that's the concern. So we've been dealing with that insect, which is something new that comes along. So you're constantly changing things up and dealing with issues that come about, and it's all related to Mother Nature. There's no one perfect growing season. There's always something up. There's always a twist in the whole mechanism, that makes it work. So you gotta find a screwball that comes in and how to hit it. It's difficulty. People aren't aware of how intense it is. It's growing grapes is intense. Well, I think the biggest challenge for most people going into wine business is the unknown. One of the things that most of them are not aware of is how difficult it is to grow grapes. And I've seen this happen over and over again, where people go into wine business and they might know how to make really great wine, and they may have had a lot of experience making really good wine, and somebody brings them beautiful fruit. And if you have beautiful fruit, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to make great wine. I think the hardest part of this whole thing is to bring the great fruit to the vineyard, from the vineyard to the winery. And New Jersey is not a state that it's not like Napa Valley where you have perfect climate. There are certain places in the world that it's perfect, and they don't have to farm half as hard as we do, and their results are even better because they have the right amount of sun, the right amount of rainfall, the right amount of everything. And so we have to, because we're in a state that's not really a wine state, and most states aren't a wine state, everybody has to adjust to the best of their ability to deal with the climate. And so it's, the Virginia has their issues, and Oregon has theirs, and Washington State has theirs, and we have ours. I mean, we all have, every state grows grapes and makes wine. I think all but Hawaii, which makes pineapple wine, but everybody else makes wine out of grapes. So I can imagine in some states have some difficulty because I can imagine growing grapes in southern Florida or Idaho or Minnesota. I know they have a lot of varieties in Minnesota now that can survive to 40 degrees below zero. Not that I want to grow them in New Jersey, but for Minnesota, it must work, There's Scuppernong 9 that grows in northern Florida, and it grows out in Georgia and places like that, and they make wine out of it. Certain varieties do well in certain places. Some varieties, like Chambourcin, which we grow here, grows very well out in Ohio as well, and Maryland and New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So I think there's depending on where you are, and I think in southern New Jersey we're pretty lucky because we could grow a lot of really good grapes here. It's more of a challenge than it would be if you're in Sonoma or Napa, but we ourselves are growing 4 of the 5 Bordeaux Reds. We grow everything but Malbec. We grow Cab Sauvignon, Cab Franc, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and it's working out. I mean, it's sometimes it could be challenging at times, but we're capable of growing things like that. We're growing Chardonnay, and so it's challenging, but it's not impossible.
Are you still doing a large percentage of your business in sparkling wine?
Not so much. I wish that would come back. I think it will at some point. We have the ability to do it both ways. We can do the classical French method, which is method champenois, or the Charmet process. There's 2 different ways of making sparkling. We have the ability to do it both ways. Champagne, I really think it's a shame that we lost the word champagne. And America used it and stole it from the French for a long, long time. And somewhere about 15 years ago, everybody decided that we better not call it champagne because it's not from the Champagne region. But it is, when people think of champagne, they think of sparkling. And I think that may have hurt sales across the board, in my father's day, they made a lot of champagne, what they called champagne. It was either Brut or Naturel or extra dry or pink champagne or sparkling burgundy, and it was all called champagne. But because it's not, today we all are politically correct, and I guess because it's not from the Champagne region of France, we should probably not call it champagne. And but sparkling wines are, they come up, they go down, they come up, they go down, but they're not. I think they're coming back, but it's for at least I see it as being a slow comeback. But I would say in 40 years I haven't seen it really peak. The only time it peaked, I think it was around the millennial, around 2000, 1999 or so, when everybody was, gearing up for sparkling for New Year's Eve. But to not allow us to call it champagne, I think that hurt sales and I heard it across the board. But the French were very upset that we stole that name some 50, 60, 70 years ago, and they wanted it back, and they wanted it clearly to be only them from that region. And this and nobody in Europe ever stole the word champagne. Only the Americans did it. The Spaniards always called sparkling wine, and the Spaniards also make a lot of sparkling wine. Well, okay, the classical French method is called method champenoise, and that's the original way that they do it in France. That allows them to call it champagne. It's where the bottle is individually fermented. You have still wine, which is called your cuvée, and you add yeast. And today we use this really cool thing called micro-encapsulated yeast. But before that, we used to just add yeast, and it would be in the bottle, mixed with the cuvée, and there would be dextrose. And you would re-ferment that wine in the bottle under pressure, using what's known as a soda cap top. When you open a beer bottle, an old-fashioned beer bottle, when you had to open it with an opener.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's what's used, but they called it a soda crown. And that would when that would ferment in a champagne bottle, you would figure out how much dextrose you would need, how dry the wine was, to get to about 75 or 85 psi in the bottle. So that's where you're getting your carbonation. So it would re-ferment, but it would re-ferment under pressure in the bottle. And then you would go through a process where you'd have to clear the bottle, because now you have all this yeast in the bottle, and they had the French, when we had them here too, were these riddling racks where you'd put the champagne on the riddling racks, and you would quarter turn them every day until all the sediment went to the bottom of the bottle, and it would be upside down. And then you would invert them. Well, you wouldn't invert them. You would put them into a neck freezer, and you would freeze the neck of the bottle, until it was frozen. And the next process is called disgorging, where you would open the bottle, take that soda crown cap off. The PSI in the bottle would release a certain percentage of the PSI, would push out the sediment, and then would be putting on a dosage machine where it would refill that bottle from the space that you lost with another bottle that's on the machine. And if you were making a sparkling that was sweeter, you would add a dosage, which is a combination of wine and sugar. It's almost like simple syrup, but it's not made like simple syrup. It's made out of wine. So then you would inject that in, and that's on a dosage machine. And then when the bottle's completely full to 750 milliliters, it would be removed and put onto a machine that corks it and puts the wire hood on. Now that's the classical French method. Now, the method, the Charmet process, is all done a little bit different, where you're doing it under pressure, where you're injecting CO2 and you're carbonating it under a pressurized tank using carbonation, CO2 as a carbonator. And you'd have still wine, and all you're doing is carbonating it artificially, using CO2 and bottling it under pressure. And that's what's commonly used today. Method champenoise is extremely expensive to do, very labor intensive. Most people that do it are either smaller wineries or very expensive sparkling houses. And in Europe, you have mostly in the European wine industry, either a sparkling house or a winery. There's not too many wineries in Europe that actually do wine and champagne. You either designated to do a wine or champagne, but you don't usually do them both. Like Charmet, like Dom Perignon or Moet, Chandon, they're champagne houses. They don't really get into the wines at all. but the process is it's there. We we do both, depending on what application we want to do. We have the ability to do both because we have the equipment to do both. But someday I'd like to see champagne come back. During my dad's tenure, I think it was a big thing. In the 60s and 50s, drank a lot of sparkling. A lot of champagne was consumed. I guess in the movies, when you watch the movies, they drank a lot of champagne. And somewhere along the line, it kind of lost its luster, and it's coming back slowly.
Yeah, they always had those old ridiculous champagne glasses, not the newfangled flutes. It was always the sort of Audrey Hepburn style. And they're crowning them differently now. Today you're actually you get up and get a bottle of sparkling wine. It does have a soda crown top, where you just pop it up in like you would a bottle of beer, an old-fashioned bottle of beer. And they're getting, because corks are so expensive, and champagne corks and wire hoods are expensive. So, you're seeing a lot of these smaller ones that are doing sparklings using a crown cap as opposed to a champagne cork and a wire.
Thanks again for tuning in. And don't forget to subscribe anywhere you listen.